and good afternoon. Always good to hear that music. I'm John Harper, and that music means it's time for Helping Seniors of Brevard for this Wednesday. Let's get things underway. Introducing to you right now the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard and the host of our show. Here is none other than Kerry Fink. Hi, Kerry.
Hey, John Harper. It's always pleasant to be on the radio here Wednesdays lunchtime on 90.3 WEJF FM. And a special welcome to those listening online at WEJF.net. And also, if you are catching this later, which a growing number of people do, either as a podcast, which you can find on any place from Apple iTunes to Hey Alexa on your Amazon podcasts, or just wherever you want to go and get a podcast. You just look for Helping Seniors Radio. And, of course, those people who find us on Facebook and YouTube, because we make it available there. And, in fact, just last week, they opened up another, thing on the YouTube where they officially now do podcasts. So we're represented there as well as Helping Seniors of Brevard. Now in our 12th year of service to Brevard County, we're the organization that was founded by Joe Steckler, who is still our president and founder today. And he is the guy that created the Joe's Clubs, which are helping seniors throughout Brevard County to this day as part of Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation. And I remember when I met him, Bill Johnson, who is our special guest today, board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the law firm William A. Johnson, P.A. And, Bill, I remember when I met Joe, he said, I did all these things to try to make things better for families that are having challenges with a loved one having a memory thing. But then I also recognize that there's so many challenges that seniors face that we really need kind of a resource central for that. And Bill is somebody that has kind of like walked with Joe from really the get-go when he was getting all that started. You really see that too.
I do. There's definitely a need to educate folks.
And that is really the main story for Helping Seniors for 12 years now. Nancy Deerdorf, who has also worked with Joe, she's been involved in Helping Seniors since the beginning days and before, back in Joe's Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation days. But she's the one that you reach when you call our Senior Information Helpline, which is that free call. I'm going to give you that number, so grab a pencil. The number that you call for the Helping Seniors Information Helpline is area code 321-473-7770. And last year she took, I think it was 5, if I get this close, it was close to 5,500 calls last year that she managed through that Senior Information Helpline. But, Bill, we're always busy trying to get ahead of that by getting people information. So, a lot of times people call up and say, well, I just have a simple question because I need a phone number. How do I reach someone about this? But a lot of times it's really complicated stuff that might have been best served if the people had had a moment to kind of plan a little bit ahead. And so Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney, just was the keynote speaker at this month's Helping Senior Resource Center of Brevard event that we held at Buena Vista Estates there in Melbourne. And it was really a full house. People were coming in because, Bill, you were talking about your legal checklist. And this is really that battle cry of how do we get people, instead of having to fight their way through, a difficult situation after the fact, but just get ready and in front of it.
Kind of reminds me of the Boy Scouts. Be prepared.
That's a great point, because what the information that you were sharing, and actually we were telling the I would almost call it a standing room only audience. I was saying as we were in the meeting when they said I was reminding them that you were going to be on the radio with us today, and I said I really would think it would be great if we could recap that, so that people can really get this. In fact, you have an article in the February edition of Senior Scene in the Helping Seniors newsletter titled It's a New Year, but you're really kind of on that same bandwagon of let's make sure you've got the right paperwork. And that's kind of what you shared then, both in the article in Senior Scene magazine, but also at the event on Monday. And I thought it would be great for us to cover that again today, because so many of us, we have great intentions to get all this stuff done, and then somehow life gets in the way and we don't deal with it until it becomes a crisis. So where should we begin?
Well, one, it's a new year and it's already March.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Well, in fair defense, this came out the 1st of February is the article, just saying.
But the gist of the article is that, it's a new year and it's a perfect time to go back and review all your legal documents, look at your wills and or trusts, beneficiary designations, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, living wills, and make sure they're all up to date and say exactly what you want them to say. And that's especially true if there's been a major life event. Has someone died? Has someone got divorced? Is someone got married? Has there been a birth, a death? Is somebody go off to prison? All those things can change the way who you want to leave your assets to, as well as who you want to be put in place to making your financial and healthcare decisions.
It was a real good conversation. First of all, you kind of presented through like the key documents that we all ought to have, and we will take a minute and go through those. But I thought it was really interesting after you had kind of gone through that, because it became kind of a freewheeling exchange because you asked for questions. And as I told you when you came into the studio and we were talking before the radio show, I said, I learned something every time. It's like always fascinating to kind of hear behind the scenes, because these people bring in some really interesting real life situations.
They do. They do. And they give you a lot of real life situations of what happens if nobody does the proper planning.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in and maybe talk about because we don't want to assume that anybody has already done their homework correctly. So if you have, then this should be just a great checklist, and you can go, yep, I got that. Yep, I got that. But if you haven't, listen up, because Bill is going to share some thoughts about the paperwork that you need to have in place. So, Bill, where do we dive in on those key documents as your legal checklist?
Well, let's start with the estate planning end of things. How are you going to leave your assets to your heirs? Are you going to do it by a will, which would go through probate? Are you going to try and avoid probate with a trust? Are you going to do it by beneficiary designations, which also would avoid probate? Or are you going to rely on joint title, where when you die, it goes to the surviving owners with survivorship rights? So what is the plan, and how do all those interact with each other?
Yeah, I really thought it was fascinating because I've been around and learned from you long enough to understand that in almost all cases, you would want to avoid probate because it's time-consuming and it's expensive. And really, there are so many good alternatives to get you around that for the most part, right?
Yeah, my general rule of thumb is you either want the asset in a trust or you want a beneficiary on it.
Yeah, and you spent a lot of time, especially when the question and answer part of that came up, that you were explaining, because I didn't realize that it's so complicated from, because you in the course of that discussion, you were talking about some people, you would say, well, go down to the bank and, you'll set up these, what I guess is called paid on death kind of things. And then maybe if you're a brokerage account, you might do this. And you could even do it potentially with your how you title your real estate and things like that.
Exactly. So, you can put a beneficiary on virtually anything. And obviously, when you pass, all they have to do is supply a death certificate, and the beneficiary gets the asset. You don't have to go through probate. You don't have to admit the will and have an executor appointed and go through that rigmarole. So that's a fairly easy way of doing it. Mm-hmm. You kind of want to make sure you have primary beneficiaries and contingent beneficiaries in case your primary beneficiary passes. And the other way is also, putting it in a trust, and then the trust document determines who gets what and who's put in charge.
Yeah, as you were talking about all these different ramifications, one of the things I walked away with, which I always want to put this caveat in place all the time, is, I heard several people talk about, maybe they had brought in stuff that had been done in another state, or God forbid they chose to do it online. And as you were going through some of these scenarios and answering the questions, it really seemed like a little knowledge could be a dangerous thing. And so we have had this thing, we call it getting your ducks in a row, is kind of our euphemism for what Joe has always talked about, putting together an aging plan. And so we're very much about, like, first of all, you need to get your ducks in a row, but don't do this on your own, because some of the things that you were going into as you were helping people with their questions, it struck me that, wow, I didn't know that if you are going to do a title in a certain way, you want to be careful, because how it would be looked at after death has a lot to do with it. You said, like, one example, I just remember this, you were talking about, okay, two people, maybe you own a piece of property with your brother or something, or sister or something like that, and both names are on the title, but it has a lot of meaning what happens if somebody goes away.
Exactly. So if you have two names on the deed to a house, but it doesn't indicate any marital status, or it doesn't say joint tenants with right of survivorship, one person dies, that asset gets probated, that one half of that asset, because it's what we call a tenants in common situation. So you definitely want to make sure, it either says, John Doe and Jane Doe, husband and wife, which is the tenants by the entireties. Or if you have a property with other family members, John Doe and Jane Doe and Jackie Joe. Doe.
Right.
You want to, if the idea is that if one of you dies and it's going to go to the survivors, you definitely want to have joint title with right of survivorship on the deed.
Yeah.
And a lot of people mess this up. A lot of people have heard about a quick claim deed, and they go down, fill one of these out, and they don't put the proper demarking on there, and subsequently they end up in a probate that they didn't think they would end up in.
Now explain that a little bit, because I'm not even sure that I fully understand, like, quit claim deed. I think I've heard the term before, but
a quit claim deed just means you transfer whatever interest you have in a piece of property to somebody else.
Okay.
And so a lot of people will quit claim deed the property to, if they got married, so they're from themselves to their husband,
okay,
their spouse and them. Some people will quit claim deed a portion of the property and put their kids' names on it for whatever reason. So that's what, as opposed to a warranty deed where the transferor warrants they have good title.
Aha.
So a quitclaim deed, you're just saying, whatever I own in this, here I'm transferring that.
Wow.
And a warranty deed says, I'm warning that I own this, and I'm transferring good title.
How could somebody get in trouble then, as an example that you're talking about? Because clearly this is, again, one of those areas where a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So somebody says, I got the quitclaim deed, so now this property's mine. And maybe some years down the road, they turn around and go to sell it. It could be a problem for them at that point, right?
Well, yes, they may end up having to do a probate they didn't think they were having. So,
wow.
So mom owns a piece of property. Dad's passed. Mom's a widow. She has a daughter living with her who is helping mom with everything and her care. Mom decides to add daughter to the deed. So instead of going to see a lawyer, she decides to fill out one of these quitclaim deed forms, transferring her interest from herself to her and her daughter. But she leaves off joint tenants with right of survivorship.
Wow.
She doesn't put that on there. Mom subsequently passes. Well, that is going to be viewed as tenants in common. Mom's half of the property would get probated. And let's just say mom's will says everything I own gets divided between my three kids. So now one half's owned by one kid.
Gotcha.
That same kid owns 1/3 of the other half, or a sixth.
Wow.
And the other 1/6 are owned by the other two kids.
Wow.
So now you can have a big unintended consequence.
And I think one of the things that I also got out of the conversation Monday is because people were bringing you questions, like, well, I have a piece of property, I'm just making this up, in North Carolina, I can't remember. But the point was, you were also careful to explain that each state manages those kind of things in a different way.
Correct. So some states presume things are joint tenants with right of survivorship. Other states presume it's tenants in common, absent
something
you
specific.
actually writing down. So the default position.
And you said Florida is one of those that looks at it, presumes it, was it tenants in common? Am I saying
Yes.
that right? So that's not the same. So like if you just had two names on there, you would find yourself in exactly the situation we were just talking about.
Correct.
And so when you, so here I go back to this. So if you went to this, you saw the ad on TV and say, "Oh, I'm just going to save all this money and I'm going to go and do all my paperwork online," you'll find out, or you could very much find out, that some of these nuances are getting you in trouble at the very moment you can't go back and fix it.
Correct. And that's especially why, if you're a lawyer and you're licensed in one state, you don't want to be doing deeds for another state.
Yeah.
A, because you're not licensed there, and B, because you might not know what the rules are.
Yeah. So we're talking. So one whole area that we talked about is you have to get all these things right about wills, trusts, and trying to maybe keep yourself out of probate. So that's one whole area of your legal checklist. And again, to me, Bill, why would anyone try to become an attorney on their own instead of just sitting down? It's not that expensive to get the answers to because I remember that was so clear just listening to 30 odd people in the room asking questions. Everybody's case or situation was it was like some commonality, but this one had this particular unique circumstance, and that one, but it's this is from that state, or things like that.
Correct. And you have to know how all those things interplay.
Right.
I gave the example, of the lady who rents a property, but she has only like a bank account and a brokerage account. Mm-hmm. And both of those are designated to go to specific beneficiaries, her kids. But in her will, it says everything, 10% goes to the church, and then 45% to one kid, 45% to the other kid. Well, the question is, where are you going to get the 10% that goes to the church? Because all your assets you put beneficiaries on.
Wow.
So
right.
They're not going to go through probate. So your will is going to be irrelevant to that.
Wow.
So basically, the church won't get anything.
Yeah. So we're talking about your legal checklist. This is an area of expertise for Bill Johnson, who's a board-certified elder law attorney, longtime friend of Helping Seniors organization. And we're kind of drawing from this really robust exchange that we had with the Senior Resource Center Community Information Event. It's something we do on the last Monday of each month, and we've been having them so far this year, 2023. At Buena Vista Estates. They've made available a great room for us and provide great hospitality. And it actually ends up sort of being a lunch and learn, because if you RSVP to this, then you get, actually they send you home with a nice lunch after having some nice snacks and things there on site. So it's a great place to be. But again, you have to RSVP ahead of time. And Bill Johnson on Monday was literally talking to a full house. And so we talked about we'd like to bring that conversation to the radio, your legal checklist. So we've talked about kind of those documents that you want to think about your property, but then there's other areas we got to talk about too, right?
That is your incapacity planning.
Okay.
Your durable power of attorney, who's going to manage your finances if you become incapacitated. Your healthcare surrogate, who's going to make your healthcare decisions, and your living will, what your end-of-life decisions are. And depending on where you are in life, again, if there's been some major changes in your family, again, divorces, marriages, births, deaths, people going to prison, that kind of thing, you may want to change who you have in there. Also, other people can have healthcare events too and not be there to help you. So those things would make you want to change your documents. Also, your health. We talked about this. What is your health done? Has your health, is your health being called into question? Are you having major health event? You may want to rethink who's helping you right now. Are those the people you want to put in the documents? So those are the things that we would, or you should consider, especially when it comes to the incapacity planning stuff.
Yeah. So again, as you were rolling through questions, I remember people were asking, they'd heard about that thing called 5 wishes. And one thing stuck out to me, Bill, that you mentioned in the talk. You said you thought that the living will, which is the name of the document. You said it's a challenging name because a lot of people get it all confused, because when you're sort of on the external side of this, we think, well, I think a will, I understand what a will does, but a living will, then it kind of feels like it's a strange name.
Yes, if I was back then when they were naming these things, I would not have called it a living will.
Right.
Because it just totally adds to the confusion. A lot of people think a living will. Well, we have a will.
Right.
We have a living trust.
Right.
And then we have a living will.
Wow.
and so between the three of them, you can understand why people get confused.
Yeah, no doubt. So we're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson with the law office, William A. Johnson, PA. Bill, I know you do. First of all, you were very kind to share your time and do this seminar on Monday, but you do frequently. I think sometimes you have talks that you give up at like one senior place and things like that. And I know you're pretty generous with your time to help people get ahead of this. If somebody's interested, they want to learn more, they want to figure out, maybe the next step is they would like to come see you at one, because really the fascinating part for me was not only hearing you go through the checklist, but then listening to those questions from the audience. It was absolutely fascinating. How would people learn more or get more information about those?
Well, they can always go on the One Senior Place website, and they'll find out when we're speaking. Generally, we speak about estate planning and Medicaid there, but I also do seminars on VA aid and attendance, on special needs trust planning, and even pet trusts.
Oh, wow. Is that where you leave things for Fido?
Yes, that's exactly.
So it actually happens.
Yeah, there's that show on Netflix.
Yeah.
All centered around the alleged $23 million trust for the dog.
Well, it's interesting stuff. Well, we're gonna continue the dialogue with Bill Johnson, board certified elder law attorney, as we get into the second half of the Helping Seniors radio show. Just before we go to mid-show break, I want to make sure people also have access to your website, floridaelderlaw.net.
Yes.
And you publish a book that's actually going to be coming out, right, in the Boomer Guide?
Correct. It's the Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
Which is a great place to start. It's a great part.
It's kind of been reduced to a pamphlet now, but it used to be much thicker when I had to do a lot of the research on the healthcare facilities in the county.
Yeah.
But thank God the Boomer Guide took that over, so I don't have to do that. And
you can stay focused on the legal part. Well, it's good. Well, we'll be back for the second half of the Helping Seniors radio show here in just a few minutes, right on 90.3 FM, WEJF.
Hey, that music means we're ready to get the second half hour of Helping Seniors of Brevard underway. Kerry Fink, the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, and the host of the show, is ready to go into the second half hour with his special guest, Attorney Bill Johnson. Right now, here's Kerry.
Thanks, John Harper, and welcome back for the second half of the Helping Seniors Weekly Radio Show. We gather lunchtime around the radio on 90.3 FM, WEJF, and online at WEJF.net. And we get to talk about things that if we're doing this the right way, and certainly that's always our hope and prayer, is that we are giving you information that's going to help you get ahead of the aging curve. Joe Steckler, our president and founder, he's always called it making an aging plan. He said, you've got to develop your own aging plan because your circumstances are going to be different than somebody else's. The health things may be different. The financial things may be different. The family situations may be different. There's a lot of reasons why a cookie cutter approach to this doesn't work. So we have actually purposed ourselves as a Florida nonprofit that one of the things we try to do is provide that education that helps you develop your aging plan, which we sort of smilingly call getting your ducks in a row. And as we have explored this now, because this is the second year in a row that we've been working our way through these different things. So, for example, in the month of February, we titled what you saw in Senior Scene magazine, where we put the Helping Seniors newsletter, as your legal checklist. And so our special guest today, well, not special guest, well, you're a special guest, but you're a regular guest here with us on the Helping Seniors organization, is board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the law firm William A. Johnson, PA. And you have been doing elder law for quite a while. So one of the things that we talk about is don't try this on your own. Get the valuable experience of somebody who's really specific in that. And that was another thing. We were talking in the first half of the show. Bill gave a really kind of almost a standing room only presentation Monday at Buena Vita at our Senior Resource Center Community Information event. And as the questions were rolling through, it really became clear that everybody's circumstance is a little different, and everybody needs that somebody to really sit down and kind of help them navigate those nuances. So in the first half of the show, and by the way, if you missed the first half, don't worry. You can go back and pick it up. Go to helpingseniorsofbrevard.org because we always make sure it's posted there. You can find it at the Helping Seniors of Brevard Facebook page or YouTube page. If you like podcasts, wherever you get a podcast, you can find it there. But Bill, during the first half of the show, we were talking about those items on your legal checklist, the same presentation that you were giving to the folks in the room on Monday. So in the first half, we talked a little bit about trusts and wills, and we also talked about those documents that would be helpful for your, I guess, proper medical care. We talked about living will and things like that. And then we were talking during the break, but we have to still cover things like taxes, investments, medical planning, and things like that. So let's continue that conversation. Where do you want to go next?
Well, let's start with, if you've had a major healthcare event and you may have a long-term care event on the horizon, you definitely need to get in and see somebody about how you're going to pay for that. You know, do you have enough assets that you're going to be able to pay out of pocket? Are you going to have to qualify for Medicaid? Are you eligible for VA in attendance? The vast majority of people out there thinks Medicare pays for long-term care. Folks, it does not. It does not. It pays a short stay at a nursing home for rehab. That's it. So if you've gotten a dementia diagnosis, or somebody's had a stroke or a heart attack, well, you need to get and come up with a plan and figure it out pretty quick and get with somebody who can help you with that.
Yeah, I was telling you during the break that I was talking with Nancy Deerdorf, who is our operations director, and she's the one that picks up all those calls when you call the Helping Seniors info line at 321-473-7770. And if you've been around Helping Seniors for any amount of time here recently, one of the biggest challenges that we have in our county is senior homes and affordable housing. And the flip side of that is actually turning out to be senior homelessness, because people are losing their homes simply because property is sold. They may have paid their rent, diligently for 12, 15 years, but now the property's sold to somebody out of state with a lot different financial plan, and they come back and say, well, that's fine. You can stay here, but your rent's going to be $600 a month more. And then if you're on a fixed income, that's not going to happen. It's not like, if you're 80, it's not like, oh, fine, I'll go get a second job or work overtime and try to make this happen. It really becomes a problem. And one of the things that Nancy had said, just as we were conversing at the end of the session, she said, I don't think people really realize that they will evict 80-year-olds, because she says, I get those calls every day. You can't, she says, I talk to people say, oh, well, Medicare will pay for that, or the government has a plan or something. And she says, I really hate to be the bearer of the news that, no, it doesn't. She said, literally what happens when they evict you, the sheriff says, where do you want us to drop you off? And that's where you are. You're at a shopping center someplace, or you're at a park someplace, and now the next move is up to you. And Bill, if you're 35 or 40, maybe you have a lot of energy and you can figure some ways through. But if you're 80, this becomes really problematical. And I think this is what you're talking about. You got to plan this stuff.
And especially for that kind of thing, that is becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Right.
Senior homelessness is dramatically on the rise.
Yeah. But even the case where we just make the assumption like, okay, somebody in the family had a stroke, it's fine, Medicare's going to cover everything. But to your point, it doesn't. You've got to put the things in place that make it all work right.
And as you know, Kerry, you and me beat that drum every moment we can to try to get people to do that. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, so, but if we are thinking properly, because that is the title of our show, the title of our show is your legal checklist. So we've talked about wills and trusts, at least on the surface. We talked about the living will, but let's talk about, like, if you sit down with somebody and hopefully we're ahead of a problem, we're not reacting to a problem, well, how do you get them to start to think about, we need to do some Medicaid planning or think what if?
Well, you need to find out, are they going to have a long-term care event? Are they going to need some care of somebody for more than a couple months?
Uh-huh.
Is this going to be a longer duration thing? And where does the family fit into this? Is there family? Are we safe at home? Are we not safe at home? Are we going to have to go to assisted living or a nursing home? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that's a great moment for me to just do a little plug because, what we've been talking about is that each month we try to have a different topic that's an element of your aging plan. So like this month, we've been talking legal checklist.
I thought you were going to plug the car raffle in there.
No, I'll do that. But the show's not over yet, Bill. This is about, but literally in March, we're going to be back at Buena Vita. The date is March on the 27th, so it's the last Monday of the month. And the topic is going to be living safe at home, your living safe at home checklist. And so our panelists there are going to include Jennifer Barton, who's the owner of Seniors Helping Seniors, Bridget Brown, who is clinical home health care expert with Center Well Home Health, and then Jennifer Allen with Vitas Healthcare is going to be there. But Bill, to the point is, the same thing. On all these fronts, we want to make sure people know that they have options and a lot more options when you plan ahead. So as you sit down with that family and you're just trying to get them an overview, get them going in the right direction, obviously that's going to be one part of it. But then another part of it is you're going to talk about investments and taxes.
Correct. Well, we're at the tax time of year, so
yes.
Make sure you are getting all your tax information prepared. Generally, you have to keep 3 years worth of tax returns.
Right.
If you have anything that involves a capital gain, you have to keep that for as long as you own the asset.
Yep.
To prove what the capital gains tax is when you sell the asset. So, and of course, it's a lot more efficient these days because if you have investments, generally, your brokerage firm knows what you bought it for, knows what you sell it for, and can tell you what the gain is.
Right.
Now, years past, that wasn't the case. You bought these things and the brokerage firm didn't keep those records.
Right.
And it was up to you to keep those records.
Yeah.
So some people have bought assets such as stocks, and we have no way of proving what the basis was. In other words, what they paid for them.
Right.
And if you can't prove what the basis is, the IRS assumes it's zero. And you have to pay a capital gain on the whole sale.
Wow.
So, yes, you want to keep that information. Also, we want to make sure that your investments are doing what they're supposed to be doing. As we all know, we've got high inflation. We got the Fed hiking interest rates. We have assets that may not be doing good in that environment. Are the assets generating enough income? Do we need to readjust those things? Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can tell you what's going to happen in the future. But you can take a best guess at it and work with a financial advisor on getting that straightened out as well.
We spend a lot of time. In fact, that's a topic that comes up on our Get Your Ducks in a Row planning a little bit later in the year. I think it's not March. It may be April. We do your financial checklist. And people say, well, I've saved for retirement. I think I'm good. I don't have to do financial planning. And then the argument that I've heard from so many people is, right, but what we're really doing now is retirement planning, which is sort of the same idea, but it's making sure that your financial plan is going to work its way through your your entire retirement.
And that's another great point is we're talking about getting everything in the row because of the new year. Mm-hmm. But what if this year you're retiring?
Wow.
You've got a whole nother checklist of things to get get enrolled in Medicare,
Yes.
decide if you're going to get a Medigap policy,
Yep.
all those things. Are you going to do an Advantage plan? Are you going to take Social Security now, or are you going to wait? All those kinds of issues pop up.
These are all big decisions. And in fact, what we were talking about also was that we've kind of identified, like, there's these big categories that everybody should be thinking about. I call them like the big seven, but basically they are, in fact, your legal checklist, your financial checklist, I want to live safely at home. A lot of people say, I want to age in place. I want to do that correctly. So what are the things you might do to make your home safe? Then another area is, what if I'm willing to consider changing how I live? Like, I might downsize. I might choose assisted living. I might choose independent living. I might need more care than that. So that's a whole other area. The fifth area is medical. We call it medical and wellness. It's kind of like a checklist, trying to stay ahead of the things that might give you a problem down the road. And then the other areas that we always get into is transportation, because you got to have a plan. Like, okay, you're driving fine now, but what if you hit a day when you can't drive? How does that work? And then kind of like last but not least on the whole thing is just what you were talking about, Medicare, because for many of us, maybe those medical bills become one of the biggest expenses, even if it's not necessarily the doctor bill. It could be the prescription bill or something like that. And Bill, we've got to have ways that we think ahead on all of that.
Correct. And there are things, if you can't afford prescription medications, where you can get them sometimes from the manufacturer for free.
Right.
Some of the pharmacies offer plans as well on getting things at lower cost. So there are options, but you have to know what those options are.
Yeah.
And there are people who can help you navigate the maze of Medicare. Yeah. Shine comes to mind.
Right.
So there are things you can do. One of the things you were mentioning, and we talked about earlier, was the issue of seniors not being able to afford rent.
Right.
Are you going to be facing a rent increase?
Yeah.
Do you have sufficient income? Because, in Brevard County, we do have some basically places that are for low-income seniors. Yeah. Except there's waiting lists.
They're full.
And if you're facing that, you need to be getting on that waiting list as soon as you can.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot because you also, I know I've heard you and Joe talk over the years about, for example, the Medicaid bed waiting list, but we're just talking about low income. In fact, Nancy Deerdorf, our operations director, when she gets a call and it's a house and it has to do with housing, she goes like, almost the first thing I want you to do when we hang up the phone, regardless of anything else, is get yourself on the waiting list for the housing assisted senior living, because it may be a 2 or 3 year waiting list, but at least you're running the clock while we're trying to figure out other plays to be able to maybe do something in between. She says you got to get that done almost like right away.
And it's crazy to me that, with the housing we kind of got a double whammy there. We had the 2008 where all these builders went out of business and nobody was buying anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, because we had those number of years where we lacked the builders and we didn't have anybody buying anything, nobody was building anything.
Right.
And all of a sudden we end up with this huge housing shortage, especially in affordable housing.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a challenge. I mean, there are plenty of apartments you can go out there, get a 1 bedroom for $2,000 or more a month. It sounds like a mortgage payment. It's crazy.
It's unbelievable when you think about it. And the other thing, Bill, that we hear all the time is, because you addressed this, I think somebody asked you a question and it caused you to mention this fact too, is like, you inherit the house, somebody passed away, and so now you've inherited the house, but as you were careful to explain that may change the whole real estate property tax dynamic of that, because they'd had homestead exemption for all these years, and so it was maybe the taxes were a few $100s because of the protections we have, and all of a sudden it jumps to many thousands.
Correct. So in Florida, when you have the homestead on the property, you get that deduction off the price of your property, but you also get a cap.
Right.
And they can't raise your property taxes more than that cap each year,
Right.
even if the value of the property goes up significantly more than that.
Yeah.
So if the value of your house goes up 20%, they can only raise your property taxes 5% in any given year. So eventually, over a long haul, that's a huge difference. The property tax bill is a lot lower than what it would be if somebody bought a new home for the same value. And subsequently, when you inherit a home or you add a kid's name to your house or something, it gets reevaluated and your tax bill can go up through the roof.
Yeah, so it's really important that here again, everything that we're talking about is why you should not go this alone when there's so much good help. And Bill, we've talked about this. This is not only for people who may be just, like I said, approaching retirement age or starting to think ahead because they should, but this has to do with so many people coming in from other states who are moving into Florida literally, it seems like by the truckload daily. And they may come in and they may be prepared with documents from another state, which may or may not be helpful to them at the right time here. And then you've got people, like you said, who may have been here all along. They thought they had everything buttoned up, but maybe there's been life changes. There's so many reasons to sit down and have this legal checklist, go through this legal checklist, but do it with somebody who really can lead and guide you correctly through it, Bill.
And regardless of all of that, you should, at a minimum, every 5 years have it reviewed.
So if somebody calls you and says, well, I'm new to town, or maybe I've been here a couple of years, maybe they haven't done a checklist in a while or had a review in a while, that's something that they could reach you guys about.
Correct.
So
we can do that too.
So how do they reach you in all these conversations?
Well, they can reach us at 321-253-1667.
And again, you've got a really, I think, a very appropriate website, floridaelderlaw.net, where there's a lot of resources. And I got to tell you, the Boomer Guide is coming out. That's in March. No, it's March, right?
Right around the corner.
Is it March 17th? I think
it is.
Because I think they're doing a St. Patty's Day kind of theme with their big event, which they always do.
You are correct.
Which they always
Boomer Bash is the 17th.
Do you remember where it's at? They always do a great job. These are fun events.
It does not say here on my calendar.
But that is also the date that your 2023 edition of the planning guide comes out, right?
That is true. It's included in the magazine.
So when you get your copy of that, you'll have a copy of Bill's. And you've been putting that together for years and years, and I guess you make sure it's updated each year as you go back to press.
We do, and we've been doing that for, I don't know how long. I want to say it's probably close to 20 years.
Well, I know when I first met you, when Joe was getting the whole Helping Seniors organization off the ground, I remember we were talking about it. You called it the Orange Book, and it was really I remember reading it for the first time and finding out, number one, how non-legalese that you had written it. It was very easy to understand, to just get the basic concepts. And for those of us that are not experts in this, we need somebody to really break it down and make it manageable for us. And your guide does that.
Yeah, we actually started with the Blue Book,
Uh-huh.
which included the addresses, phone numbers for every facility in the state.
Wow.
And that immediately got too burdensome. The cost of reproducing that was extravagant. So then we pared it down to just Brevard County and came out with the orange version.
Yep. Wow. Well, it's a lot of work, and I know you get called a lot of time in on legislative things and things like that because you are a board-certified elder law attorney, so you're always in kind of the thick of it. We're talking with Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney, and before I go into my pitch about car raffle tickets, one more time, if they want to reach your office, the best number to use.
They can reach us at 321-253-1667.
So with that, Bill, I am holding in my hand, it's 3x6, and it could be the key to your new car. I'm talking about Helping Seniors car raffle ticket, because this is actually how we keep our little organization going and able to serve the thousands and thousands of people who call us every year, or the tens of thousands who take advantage of the media offerings that Helping Seniors does. It's real easy for you to support the work. You buy a Helping Seniors car raffle ticket, and you win 3 different ways. Number 1, you're supporting the work of Helping Seniors of Brevard. And number 2, you could win a new car. And the fun of this is that Joe Steckler has been friends with AJ Hires of the Boniface Hires car dealership chain for many years. In fact, Joe has said, hey, Kerry, I was doing this last century trying to get funds to get the Joe's Clubs built. And so AJ has always helped us. This is now our 7th annual Helping Seniors car raffle. And if you've paid any attention to this, since AJ has one of almost any car that you might think you would want, you get to pick the car you want to win. So you could choose a Dodge Challenger. You could pick a Chevy Camaro. You could take a Mazda Miata convertible. You could take a Kia Sportage, or this year, because AJ is getting ready to open that brand new Mitsubishi dealership right there on US 1, you also could pick from a Mitsubishi Outlander, which is a cool little SUV. So it's kind of fun. Last year, if you remember, Bill, our winner said, I'm Camaro all the way, and she's tooling around in this sky blue kind of really cool looking Camaro today. The year before that, our winner wanted the Kia Sportage, so he's got a beautiful silver Kia Sportage. Before that, the guy wanted the Camaro. He chose to upgrade to a Camaro convertible, and then before that, if I'm remembering all the sequence of this correctly, I was a red Dodge Challenger, and our friend who won that, Karen Hoodless, still has it, and she brings it out whenever we're doing events. So, but this year, it could be you who wins. So how do you do this? You go to helpingseniors.carraffle.com, and you get your tickets. And 1 ticket is $25, 5 is $100. But here's the third leg of why this is a great deal. Number 1, helping seniors. Number 2, you could win a cool car. Number 3, you, in fact, could be getting you will be getting a great night at the museum, because Mark Pylock, the owner of the American Muscle Car Museum, opens the doors to his museum for us. He has been so generous to us each year. He makes it available. So we will have a big party Saturday, October 7th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the American Muscle Car Museum right there, 3500 Sarno Road. What a great night it is. They provide such amazing hospitality, beer, wine, soda, water, sandwiches, pizza. And most importantly, checking out Mark Pylock's collection of cars, which is probably the largest in North America, if not this part of the world, period. So when you get your ticket, you're supporting our work. You are maybe going to take home a brand new car, and you're certainly going to have a great time at the museum, although you do not have to be present to win. So I just want to make that clear. How do you get tickets? HelpingSeniorsCarRaffle.com. Number 2, call Nancy at 321-473-7770. Or board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson has those tickets at his office. And Bill, we've talked about this. Your pick usually has been the Mazda. Is that correct?
Correct.
You still favor the Mazda?
Yep, I still do.
So in the last minute here, I'm just going to tell you that we were out at a great car show, the Satellite Beach Lions Club car show Sunday, and they had given us a Mazda, a Dodge, and a Camaro out there. And Vicki Moore, who's a licensed insurance Medicare agent, she had the Mazda out there, and she got chattering with Ashley Caswell, who is captain of Team Dodge. And I think they're going to try to work the Mazda Miata into the Dodge versus Chevy challenge and take it out to Mark Pylock's test track and run it out this year. So you never know what's going to happen with all that. You got to stay tuned. They're always coming up with something new. Helping Seniors Car Raffle. That's the time we have. Thanks for joining us on Helping Seniors Radio. Thank you, Bill. We'll see you next week, 12 noon on WEJF 90.3 FM.